Croatia, Zoran Milanović.
Welcome to the World Leaders Forum at Columbia University. I'd like to start by recognizing the co-sponsors of this event, the Center on Global Economic Governance, Columbia Global Centers, and the Harriman Institute. I'd also like to thank our moderator today, Jan Svejnar, the Richard N. Gardner Professor of Economics and International Affairs, and the Director of the Center for Global Governance. It's a pleasure to welcome our distinguished visitor today, Zoran Milanović, President of the Republic of Croatia. He has held this office since early 2020 after winning a narrow victory in a runoff election. A native of Zagreb, the President is an experienced politician who has spent most of his life in public service. He holds law degrees from the University of Zagreb and the Flemish University in Brussels. He began his career 3 decades ago as an intern at the Zagreb Commercial Court. He went on to join the Croatian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and served as an advisor at the Croatian mission to the European Union and NATO in Brussels. In 1999, Milanović joined the Social Democracy Party and was later elected its president. He was named Prime Minister of Croatia in 2011 and served for 4 years. During this period, he was instrumental in negotiating the country's entrance into the European Union, which came to pass in 2013. As the newest member of the EU, Croatia is finding its way within the bloc and looking to strengthen its position in NATO and expand its role both regionally and globally. The nation of 4.2 million people emerged from the devastating Balkan Wars of the 1990s as an independent state and has worked to rebuild its economy, pass democratic reforms, and grow local industries. President Milanović has said that his goals include helping Croatia thrive as a liberal democracy with equality among its citizens and an independent judiciary. The country, however, continues to struggle with a host of challenges that include economic stagnation, corruption, regional tensions, and a migration crisis, among others. And of course, there is the COVID-19 pandemic, which has brought so much devastation to so many. Croatia's tourism industry, which accounts for up to 20% of the country's GDP, has suffered considerably, although the returns from this past summer have far exceeded expectations. The President is here today to talk about all of this and more. Please join me now in welcoming him.
Mr. President, it's a pleasure to have you here. We know about your achievements both locally and more globally. You've worked across borders. Of course, now you're holding the highest constitutional position in Croatia. And it's at the time when we're facing major challenges globally, pandemics and others, as well as within Europe itself, and of course regionally within Balkans. So I think we have an entire array of topics we can discuss. Maybe let me ask you to start with, what do you see as the main challenges, the main issues that we are coping with? You can start with the general ones and go to the specific ones in the region and back home, or the other way around, whichever way you'd like.
Again, thank you for the invitation. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure and privilege for me to be here first time after February '96, when I for the first and the last time set my foot here on this holy academic ground. So, what strikes me the most? Well, there is a plethora of issues, of course, but in retrospection, since we have finally nested ourselves within the European Union, and we were through our crucible for years, war, recovery from war, and then the very eager, at the beginning meek, but laudable, more and more, voice to join the EU and NATO, and we finally got there. And when I realized in mid-2016, and actually the Britain, English for the most part, being the biggest ethnic constituent of the kingdom, opted for leaving the EU after spending there almost 5 decades. I mean, the Brits or English are peculiar, or not peculiar, are sublime political nation. And they lived on the soil without war, famine, major interruptions, upheavals for 350 years. Once they got it, or they said, we're going to get out, I asked myself, okay, what is the fate of the EU if these guys are off? And this is something that haunts me today as well, because when you watch the processes within the EU, it's probably the most complex political association of humankind in the history of humankind. It's difficult to govern. It lacks political legitimacy because it's mostly run by the bureaucrats, non-elects. And I think that for us, for my country, the question what comes of the EU over the next 10 years is a paramount question. It's a question of it's a pinnacle. It's a question of paramount importance, because we joined the system that was supposed to be eternal, without qualms, without defects of its own, and apparently it isn't. And we have traded or given up on the sizable chunk on our sovereignty in order to get more. It's not that it's under question or question mark, but it's something to be permanently discussed and worrisome. And then, of course, I can conclude that in my view, in my apprehension, Britain left, and the British people, English people for the most part, people of middling class, as was sometimes derisively referred to by the nobility and Brahmins of London. I think that at the core of the problem lies migration or immigrations. That's my take. And I had a word the other day with Tony Blair on his visit to Zagreb, and actually asked him openly, so do you think that you are to tell that it was the root cause of that kind of decision? But he was unrelenting. He said, no, that's natural process. You cannot do anything with that. I beg to differ, though.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned this, because the Brexit indeed was to a significant extent engendered by immigrants, but paradoxically it were not immigrants from outside of Europe who caused the major upheaval there. It was the immigrants from Central Eastern, Southeastern Europe that at that point looked like the ones that people were unhappy about. So it was a particular aspect that was very interesting during the Brexit.
Well, that was exactly the narrative of Tony Blair.
Yeah.
That it's not those from abroad, but rather the proverbial or infamous Polish plumber
exactly,
of the yesteryear.
Exactly. Yes.
But I barely doubt that people like those plumbers stirred the water. It's a deeply cultural issue, and it has not much to do with Polish plumbers or Latvian engineers.
I think it was a little bit there. It was in some regions especially, but you're right. It went beyond that, definitely.
Because the fabric of the society changed.
Yeah.
And
but if I may, I mean, you are an example of a country that really has gone in terms of the integration direction very fast and very far. You joined, as you say, the European Union, you joined NATO, you're joining the Eurozone at this point. And I should mention actually a team of professors here from Columbia had the privilege of doing an executive education session for people in your government 2 years ago, precisely on the issue of entering the Eurozone. So we were very happy that we could do that. And it's quite impressive to see actually in face of all the adversity that you faced that you have been one of the most integrationist, if you want, countries within the EU.
Integrationist or not, but it came quite late, because one should take note of the fact that in the year 1990, Slovenia and Croatia, out of all later the countries that emerged later after the collapse of communism and the disintegration of more complex federal states, Slovenia and Croatia were, by all standards, measurable standards, the best positioned and poised to strike at the EU. But it simply didn't come to pass. So we had to wait for a long time, and it all comes kind of late. So it was 25 years ago. For me, it was primarily about values, core values. Fast forward to the present time, and I can only take a note that the values are not the same, and my values are not necessarily values shared by many people throughout Europe. So the Brussels, that infamous proverbial Brussels, that boogeyman in the eyes of some, hopefully not many, should show more respect and understanding for nuances and for minutiae of different cultures, because I seldom fail to know that my values from the metropolitan center of Zagreb, which is far cry from New York, but it's the best Croatia has, are hardly the values lived, cherished, and harbored by the people of countryside. So changes, yes, they're welcome.
So let's stay with Europe, if we may, for a little bit. You mentioned something that's very interesting, and I think a lot of people share the worry that you've expressed. Where is Europe going to go over the next 10 years, right? When we look at it historically, Europe really did an incredible comeback after World War II. By 1990, it looked like the European Union, or Europe sort of in general, has caught up more or less with the United States economically after the long reconstruction. And the question was where it was going to head, and where it was going to overtake the United States and so on and so forth. Japan was in the play as well. And since then, there have been quite a few problems. Further integration took place, as you say, new countries entered and so on. That's wonderful. But at the same time, the centrifugal tendencies within Europe have also increased. Do you think that they might prevail, especially when we take countries most recently, there are discussions about Poland possibly thinking of leaving unless a better solution is found between the Polish view and the EU view and so on and so forth?
Poles leaving? No way. I mean, the public support has been continuously and steadily high for the membership, the way they see it, though, the membership of sorts. But coming back to the sentence you said that Europe miraculously or fantastically recovered after World War II. Well, it depends on the angle. I mean, Europe was set and the casting was done generations ago from different angle. And very few things actually changed in terms of economic strength, openness, simply the basic fundamental traits of society and economy. The only country that really made a grade, that made a difference for herself, is Ireland. They were rock bottom, middle to upper middle class, middle income country. They're filthy rich these days. All the others are confined to their starting positions for the most part. So harmonization and making difference fundamentally actually exists only in the realm of legislation. The roles are the same. Germany is the biggest, the strongest, very dependent, I will use the phrase dependent, on the exports, and to China in particular. And the times they are changing because China is making up for all the retardedness or deficiencies or the lower level of technological knowledge or advancement, and the things that Germany happens to export to China will be supplanted or supplemented or changed by the Chinese produce in a matter of years. Germany is running extreme public extreme surplus in the exchange of goods, and almost all countries of the European Union are running steady, now definitely steady because it's been going on for quite some time, current account surpluses. So in the global economy, it's one of the rules that if everybody runs current account surplus, nobody runs because somebody has to be in deficit.
Yep.
Exactly. It's a new, my country, a small token in the European Union cannot survive. And this goes for all small countries, except those few that are endowed by natural resources. But the small countries in open economies, high middle income economy, as Croatia is, must live in an open economy. That's the lesson of history. I mean, it doesn't work different way. Being exposed to tourist economy, which is kind of, a prelude to Dutch disease. This time not because of the gas in the North Sea, as in a Dutch case, when the strong connection to one resource actually idles your impulses and reflexes, and you simply get away with it, get along with events. In Croatian case, it's tourism. So tourism generates quite a buck for a significant fraction of the population. But on the other side, it is not particularly conducive or encouraging for the development of the. I don't want to be taken the way I do not want to be taken. But actually, it is not encouraging for the higher and more advanced levels of learning. Requirements of tourism are, well, they're intellectual but pretty basic.
But
so when the whole population is directed or oriented into that, it means less STEM, less doctors, less lawyers, if you will, less humanities, because economy might not or cannot thrive on humanities, but without humanities and social disciplines, society is an empty box.
You're talking to a community that totally agrees with you. That's why we're here, absolutely. So I agree with you. I think the big development question generally, and Croatia in particular, is can you use this one sector, which brings in revenue because of the natural endowment, to develop the rest of the economy, diversify, and presumably that's where you're heading, right? That's
the thing is, we used to be that way. I mean, we used to be rather, well, if not a high-scale economy with an advanced industry, but in comparison with those with whom you can compare, and that's Central and Eastern Europe, we were more advanced. So the most of the economy, we were at the level of Czechs at the time, or even beyond that. I'm talking 80s. So a lot of knowledge has been accumulated through decades. It basically went bust through the years of transition, war, pillage, well, robbery, if you will, in some instances, to be lost for good. We were well, famous shipbuilders of the era.
Yep, absolutely.
Not a case anymore. I mean, they're adapting new technologies, and believe me, I mean, tourism is a quick buck.
Let me
and the tax policy only further incentivizes that, because they're practically not taxed.
Let me just quickly, if I may, bring you to the even more global. You mentioned China, you mentioned all this, and obviously the world has changed. China has now for over 40 years grown tremendously fast. It's a great opportunity in terms of the global economy. Obviously there are tensions that are coming to the forefront as well. Are you optimistic or are you pessimistic about the global economy, which then will have an impact for Europe and obviously Croatia?
I'm definitely pessimistic.
You're pessimistic.
But you know the saying, that the pessimist is only a form of a properly informed optimist.
I see. Okay. So you're ahead of us. Okay.
So, well, to what extent I'm properly informed, we're going to see about that. But the latest development with Australia and the Anglo-Saxon or Anglophone world to unite and actually engage China through the bunch of the nuclear-powered submarines, as if it's going to change anything with China, is a very audacious and brave, hopefully not reckless, move by the Australian government. And it's certainly not good for world peace.
So where will Europe stand on that, continental Europe?
What do you call that? Strategic autonomy?
Strategic autonomy.
Whatever that stands for, No, there is no strategic autonomy. The French are infuriated, insulted, pushed aside, and they will not let it get away so easily, at least not emotionally, from that stance. And whether it's going to help Australia, I don't know. But apparently being very rational and as all good tradesmen and seamen are self-oriented. not self-absorbed.
Yeah.
They certainly calculated their odds well and came to the conclusion that Chinese will not change, and they will continue pushing further. So at first instance it looked desperate, but maybe it is really well thought.
We'll see. As you say, this is something.
So I wouldn't
that,
be in their pants.
Yeah. Okay. And it is just for perspective. Until about 1820, China was the largest economy in the world. Then for 2 centuries or so, things changed dramatically, and obviously the last 40 years
until 1920.
1820.
1820 they were actually. They accounted for. So India was, for that matter.
India was second largest. Absolutely.
But those both two countries in aggregate accounted for 50% of the world GDP.
Yep.
But the level of productivity was, well, junka.
History repeats itself. Europe and the US accounted for more than 50% of GDP several decades ago, and now they don't anymore.
They do not anymore.
But let's come back then to Croatia and the Balkans, and generally, let's say, the position in Europe and where Europe and Croatia in particular will be heading to, because I think that's really crucial in this debate. What's your view, and where are you taking the country?
I'm not an executive president, and we are, for the most part, parliamentary democracy. The president is elected by the popular vote. I was leaning to the position previously when I was prime minister, and I had some qualms about the role of and the posturing and the grandstanding of presidents of the time, who were actually decent people, But with the benefit of hindsight, I'm talking now. I was for the election of the president in the parliament. I thought that to be more conducive, more serving to the system of democracy that we have. And you're coming from the country, the only country in the world that has recently, to the extent that I know that, shifted from the election of the president in the parliament to the direct vote.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with that.
Just for clarity
but
here,
you
I
asked
should
me
admit that
very
I was
briefly,
a player
because
in that case,
I see the people around, so maybe they would like to intervene or differ or criticize, whatever. So that's the reason I came over here.
Yes,
first
indeed.
and foremost.
So
look, we're a small country.
Tell us. Yeah.
We got to be an open economy because it's in the cards. It's tourism, evidently, because if nothing else, that sector has attracted heavy investment, and it's really, well, highly capital intensive, so it requires return, not quick, but reasonably fast. And it will continue to grow. We have to diversify in that segment of the supply, if you will, the market, to extend it and to span it throughout the year, and not at a pinnacle or peak of the 2 or up to 3.5 sizzling summer months. And well, you can make decent living out of that. Some European regions, and Croatia in terms of population does not account to much more in terms of population. It's 4 million. So north of Italy, Alto Adige, Südtirol is populated by slightly less people, but basis of the economy is not high tech. It's tourism catering to the upper middle class of the surrounding realms. It's agriculture, but kind of sophisticated to the extent it can be sophisticated, and very profitable. Step by step, it bodes well in principle, but what concerns me is the way simply Brussels and Brussels bureaucracy shows and lives in tune with the developments on the continent. Because as I said, and I will not shy from emphasizing, I've learned that lesson well. My values are sometimes incomprehensible or unacceptable to the people from different areas, regions, provinces, realms of life, whatever. Well, I had an experience as a prime minister, pushing for the equality laws and regulations for gay population, first and foremost for gay population, and it's reacted in a rebound.
I remember
and the right, but it's the easiest way, to show contempt, to despite people, to treat them with derision. That's the easy way. You have to engage them, to talk to them, and sometimes you don't have time, you don't have nerves, or whatever.
Well, but that's what leadership is about. It's not to just follow people, but to
It is to lead, but there is also a saying which is it would be quite awkward to translate it in any language. But if you want to change people, and politics is about changing people and influencing people through peaceful and civil means. In liberal democracy, if you want to change people, you should not dissociate, you should not rebel. You should sometimes go along with the river.
But I think that example you gave, plus...
And sit by the river and wait for the fish.
Yeah, but you also push very much...
Or wait for the courses of the enemies to pass through.
Okay, yeah, all right. But you pushed issues like personal liberties, freedoms, democracy, etc. So in that sense, you have been the statesman and not just the politician. And
I had that liberty and privilege, you know, but it's primarily associated with the spirit of my country, which all its downsides and shortcomings notwithstanding, is a kind of open. We are a maritime society, at least in a way, you know that. I mean, you've been there many times. Yeah. And we are the only Slavic-speaking people, if you can't categorize nations by that yardstick, that is maritime and littoral in culture, partially, but decisively.
Absolutely.
And that openness matters. So I'm coming from the Catholic country, if not, you know, profoundly and sincerely Catholic, but at least Catholic on the paper. 85% of the inhabitants labeled themselves as Catholic believers or adherents or having Catholic affiliation. 85%. So it's not exactly true, huh? But it tells you about the mood. So in such a country, I managed to become a prime minister, to be elected by a large majority, my party in the parliament in 2011, and after, you know, coming back as a revenant, kind of, in that movie.
It's true. That's true.
Like a zombie coming back with wounds and stitches and scars to win again in the direct election. So, and I'm thankful to the people who live in my country, because I'm not a declared Catholic. You can openly say that in Croatia and get away, even win.
Well, it shows you're absolutely right.
And I'm looking around, you know, and I see a number of imposters in politics, people who have converted as of this morning, you know, and until recently couldn't tell the difference between a church and a kiosk. Yeah.
Absolutely. So if you would like to, we could turn to questions, unless you have some still other things you would like to mention in the introduction.
Just one final point in this chapter of our conversation. It's an irony. So I was the one or among those few who were, if not deciding, that present at the farewell party with the Croatian contingent bound for Afghanistan in 2003. And I was really into it, especially because we were so adamantly opposed to sending troops to Iraq. I was Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time. I'm not the one who brought the decision, but I was next to the people and influencing actually two guys who did it. And I was happy because of that. Now, 20 years later, or 17 years later, I was the one who signed the decree to bring them home. And that was my electoral promise. And it was a year ago. And I said, we have to go because this is leading nowhere. This is mission creep. We should have retreated 10 years ago. And in particular, after they took down Osama bin Laden. So it's a mission creep, we go home. And a year later, it's not that I was some kind of psychic, you know, but it didn't bode well. It didn't bode well. And final sentence, I really do not think, after all the thinking and deliberation and, if you will, some experience in military and state matters, how this evacuation, eventually infamous, not the best thought through, how else it could have been executed. I still don't see the way out. So to leave September, November, and to signal to the enemy actually that we are retreating and that we are taking over the most vulnerable parts of the population. In the case of the US, it seems to be 300,000 people who will eventually find shelter in the US. You immediately signal to the foe that you do not believe in the project. So they would have been run down this way or the other.
Let's stay a little
No
bit
happy
here,
end.
if we may, because it is very interesting. You and your country were among the newer members of NATO when this
2009,
started.
yeah.
Exactly. And so you were kind of the
I was
ones...
national coordinator for NATO in 2003.
You were, right, exactly. So you were there sort of standing side by side to prove, in some sense, that you were for the ideas and ideals that NATO stood for, and you went into Afghanistan
Against
with it.
terrorists in the first place.
Terrorists,
Against
obviously.
terrorists
Yeah.
and killers and baby killers and civilian killers.
Right.
But only in the second derivation, we were for nation building. You cannot build nation out of thin air or scratch. And for bringing democracy to Afghanistan, I never really deluded myself with that.
So what is your assessment? Just if you take, I know it's early for an assessment, but suppose you were to look at it over the entire period and the involvement of your country in it, was it a worthwhile?
Oh, sure it was. You know, but
intervention,
on the sub-tactical level, globally speaking, our guys and girls went there, earned some money, built some homes, bought clothes, schooled their kids, learned some skills with Americans, that's it. Nobody got hurt. Nobody got killed. Just one person got killed. But it's very, you know, selfish approach.
Yeah, that's from
But
the
you
point
asked
of
me,
view of the
you asked
country.
me
Yeah.
for Croatia, and I'm representing
Right.
Croatia. I was sworn to respecting Croatian constitution and self-interest. And the nations, yes, they are selfish. They have their borders, territory, that's essential.
So maybe one last thing before we turn to questions. Where do you see the Balkan area going? Is it promising? Is it not? I know you are an informed optimist, but how do you see it?
Okay, so in Bosnia there is a problem because they've been under tutelage of the international community, and the international community is faceless and soulless. It has to be impersonated in somebody. It hasn't been for years. Serbia, which is run by the democratically elected president and his party, by the popular will of Serbian people, but the hard thing is that that person was one of the most prominent and loudest warmongers in the 90s. So it's an obstacle. It's an obstacle, and the country is negotiating, has closed just few chapters, and in my view does not harbor strong intent, the governing people, strong intentions to do that. So I would like to be dissuaded or proven wrong on that. There are Macedonia, North Macedonia, Albania, who are NATO members, trying hard, fighting, trying to prove their case with ebb and flow, more or less success, and Montenegro, which again happens to be in a position or viewed by some as a geopolitical prey. And NATO, Washington and Brussels remained mostly silent on that, on the developments of the last 2 weeks. But that's something that requires more time and concentration, and I don't think we're going to tackle this here.
Very good. So maybe we'll turn to questions. Maybe we can have the first question coming up.
Hi, my name is Catherine. I'm a graduate student studying at the School of Social Work. And my question for you would be, as a political leader, how do you promote communication and interactions between government agencies and constituents to create a collaborative political environment?
Well, I do not anymore because I'm not an executive, but I used to be. And I left some footprint. Simply, in the European Union, and we are members of that integration, that suprastate and suprastate, supranational organism, into which some sovereign rights and prerogatives of the governments and the peoples are vested. We had to comply. We were pushed to comply. Something was done voluntarily, something under pressure. That's how the life goes. To simply be more open, more how to put it that way, to communicate with the public, to give reasoned opinion to most of the legislations and provisions in the broader legislative normative body. Previously, it was mostly backroom dealing. It remains to be to a certain extent, but every law passed in the Croatian government, and saying this, we're not an exception in the EU, has to be well reasoned. The public has to be consulted, and actually not a single law is being brought to the process that is illicit. Now, comparing with the US, it is different. It is different. I think it gets much more partisan here these days, and it's been going on for the last at least five years. So I don't know whether this satisfies your expectations for the question, but there is not much to say. It's standardized, but of course the countries differ. Hungary has its peculiar, unique approach. Poland, for that matter, also. Some other countries are in Central Europe, the countries that emerged from the communist regimes and which are in all aspects new democracies, or interrupted, re-emerged, reinvigorated, resurrected democracies, because some of them were democracies prior to the World War II. Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, for that matter, more than anybody else. It was more democratic than probably after UK and Scandinavian countries and Benelux, the most democratic country in Europe. But it took them, you know, the whole generation was wiped out. So that's my answer.
Very good. Thank you. We have, I think, the second question coming up. Yes.
Hello.
Hi there. My name is Luka Pusek, and I'm a sophomore at Columbia College. The generational divide in Croatia is quite large, with older generations having experienced the war and holding largely conservative beliefs, while people my age, having grown up since, hold more liberal beliefs and faith in the EU. How does this affect your policy making, and how is my generation represented in these policy developments?
What's your extraction? You are from, what is your extraction?
I'm from Dubrovnik.
Oh, so you're Croatian. You're from Croatia.
Yeah.
And now we come to the fragile, you know, the slippery slope, because I have addressed him as being from Croatia, Croatian, but not Croat, because Croat is an ethnic affiliation. It's more deeply embedded, and you never know, even though, you know, vast majority of people are Croat.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of impertinent, you know, to go wa-bank that way. So you're Croatian, you're from Croatia, you're from one of the cradles, one of the Croatian essences. That's that maritime, medieval, and New Age republic, which traded with London, and after which the biggest freighters are named Argosi, which is corrupt from Ragusa, which was Italian term from Dubrovnik, which is Slavic, actually. Dubrovnik has been Slavic-speaking enclave for at least the last 400 years. Now, generational divide. First, you are few, Luka. You're few. So we have less and less youngsters, but that's the plague and the downside of practically all European countries, if not corrected by immigration, which in Croatian case doesn't happen, and probably will not. And if it does, it will create a tremendous challenge for us, because we are small, and as such definitely delicate, and it makes matter very complicated. But you said that the old generation is more conservative. Well, it depends on the angle. You know, I was the political leader, the party leader, so I was partisan. Not Tito partisan, but partisan in an attitude and an approach to the confrontational spirit of the politics. And without confrontation, politics is nothing. Dialectics, not debate. But then again, you know, the scores of my voters actually were coming from the older generation, and especially in the late years of my political activism that I spent at the helm of the Social Democrats, because the people are aging. That's inevitable. We know that. So those who were in their 50s or 40s throughout the years reached their 60s and 70s. And those people used to be very conservative, if we are speaking the same language, but what the conservatism, American conservative, not British, because British conservative, it's very sophisticated. It has nothing to do with Croatian conservative, which is deeply traditional, you know, suspicious of all the changes and foreigners, you know, looking at them with sneer and lack of trust. But finally, when I was on my way out to the outdoor, actually the most of my voters, and that's what worried me, were older people. Were older people who rose through the communist years and didn't bother voting liberal social democrat as I was. Sometimes even being that bold, hoping nobody would really understand or grasp what I said, but I said it for the sake of my soul, that I'm libertarian. And depending on the recipient, you know, some people took it as a slur, and some people took it as a, but it's altogether a different matter. But Luka, have you been raised in America, or? We cannot hear him anymore.
Can't hear him anymore. No. All right. Well, let's take the next one.
Hello, Mr. President. It's an honor to have you here. My name is Bekim Bruka, and I'm a student of political science at Columbia School of General Studies. And my question is, like, what is the official position or opinion of the Office of the President of Croatia to the Open Balkans initiative instigated by the President of Serbia and the Prime Minister of Albania, and does it pose any threat to the integration of the Balkan countries into the European Union?
Thank you. To my knowledge, it includes, it extends to 3 countries, is that right? So Albania, North Macedonia, and Serbia. And I cannot see anything in that initiative that would endanger or harm or impede a European quest, if you will, by these 3 countries. But the positions are different. You know, in the case of Albania, I see a real effort and sincerity. In case of Kosovo, which you haven't mentioned, and I assume that you're coming from one of those countries, it's troublesome because 5 EU members have not recognized Kosovo as an independent subject of international law as a state. Macedonia was finally recognized after settling a deal with Greece about the name, as if, you know, Germans were contesting the right of France to bear the name France, which is in its origins Germanic. But they settled it finally, only to be pushed to the corner recently by Bulgaria on some educational issues and textbook of history in Macedonian public schools. Can you believe that? I mean, it's like visceral, you know, it's intimate space. You do not enter that. But that's how the politics are sometimes perceived and run in that part of Europe. So, the open space, yes. You know, but we'll see what happens. I mean, I've heard a lot of initiatives coming from Belgrade in particular, so I will not be cynical. Okay, why not? It sounds well, it bodes well, but you know, as the impertinent and probably politically incorrect saying of the yesteryear says, it ain't over till the fat lady sings.
Very good.
It's from the opera Valkyria.
On that night?
It ends with a huge, voluminous lady
On that note, why don't
so it ain't over. We're going to see about it.
One last question, and then we will unfortunately have to conclude. Do we have one more question coming up? Yes.
Hello, Mr. President. My name's Alec Gasperry. I do medical research up at Columbia University Medical Center. And my question for you is how you and your government plan on and whether or not you anticipate political problems with the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina over the completion of the Pelješac Bridge. Thank you.
Over the completion, okay, I got it. I copy. Well, it's been all but completed by European money. That's what I call, you know, a full success, because the project has been it's been fantasized about, you know, and abused by many politicians for the purposes of temporary for the spirit of the moment, incitement of the electoral body, voters. Finally, when we realized that no other solution works, we applied for the EU project. And it's a huge, it's a hefty one. And construction, physical construction started 2.5 years ago, and the bridge has been put together, so it's been connected. Now we are talking about final works, and it hasn't been, of course, free of the misunderstandings, the whole project. Between Zagreb and official Sarajevo and one entity or one constituent peoples and its representatives in Sarajevo, and that is Bosniaks. So, but it hasn't been really productive, because the bridge has been built on the Croatian, if not soil, then territory and internal waters, and as such recognized by Brussels. I mean, who thinks that the Brussels would agree to finance the project otherwise? But there is one particular point to this whole project. The construction works are being done or performed by the Chinese state company. So that's Europe, huh? Okay, you have a problem of the employment of huge construction enterprises. The competition is stark and strong. If you only considered applying for the public tender in China, you are a very naive person, you will never get it. But the opposite doesn't work. So the Chinese company actually got a bidding with German, French, and I don't know, Italian company. And on the account of being the cheapest, Chinese carried the day. So how generous European Union is. But is it smart? No, it was not your very question. The question is troubles. Well, it's over, it's done. It's done. So I will not say that we were ever blackmailed. I never spoke in such a tone. But the very sensation of traveling from one part of your country to the next, and the final point to the far south, Dubrovnik, which is territorial but also symbolic and emotional, and having to pass through the territory of a neighboring, I wish to believe, a friendly country, is a frustration. So that bridge has been a miracle in waiting for a generation, if not generations, of Croatians and, yes, Croats, ethnic Croats. Yeah. And it means a lot to us.
As you mentioned, this is actually an example where the European Union played an important part by recognizing the project as legitimate, and therefore the project took place.
It's a sector of public construction and infrastructure, and it's a particular sector of cohesion. And actually, that's the only yardstick by which I will, from now on, be measuring the success of our being and living within the EU. And it's all about money. Yep. It's not exactly about core values on which we might differ. Well, core values, of course. It's liberal democracy. But when you mention that in Budapest, you are looked upon as in disdain or in wonder, what are talking about. It's liberal democracy with its tenets. So it's free press, it's free academy. When you can beg to differ and actually even insult people and take insults, it hurts. It's what I said, free press and free judiciary. On these three pillars, first and foremost, democracy rests. The rest is just a condiment.
It turns out we can take one more question, so if one of you would be willing to pose one more question, we'll do that.
Hello, Mr. President, and thank you for being here. My name is Julian Mello. I am a senior pursuing political science.
Oh.
My question involves the American conflict in Afghanistan. If we concede that the American military mission and efforts in Afghanistan experienced a gradual mission creep over time, at what point do you think that the American government understood that it could no longer continue engaged in the efforts of nation building? Thank you.
2011, definitely, May the day of the assassination of Osama bin Laden, which we all watched, well, not exactly live, but next to live. I think that a decision by the Trump administration to withdraw was, well, overdue but welcome. By the way, I'm the only European political leader, the category involving prime ministers and presidents, who openly and cheerfully endorsed President Biden while he was only a candidate. So I was probably a little bit reckless to do that, but I did it. I thought the Finnish president was the other, but he denied that to me in person the other day. So that's my political position. I do have understanding, though, why so many people in America voted for Donald Trump, and you can find very fine people among them. But in Afghanistan, so yes, May 2011, no nation building. No nation building. So it was always a bridge too far. It was always a bridge too far.
So you would say in terms of the
when I said very fine
building
people, I hope that people understood and took the irony of my words. I was kidding, because that's something that he referred to the people who are not exactly very fine.
But if I may stay with this as we close, so your view is that whatever was achieved after 2011 was not really worth the effort at that point in terms of what happened?
I think so, yeah. I think so. Okay. I mean, it was worth it as long as Osama bin Laden has been at large, or in pajama, whatever. And once they got him, that was at the core contents of the mission. To get hold of him, to get hold of the people who were responsible for the biggest slaughter in the new American history. Right. By the way, I happened to be very close to the, not ground zero, but to Pentagon when the plane hit on September 11th.
Yeah.
So I was not exactly an eyewitness, but maybe an ear witness.
Close.
Yeah. Doing my job as a diplomat.
Very good. Well, Mr. President, it's time to thank you. It's been a real tour de force. You've covered the global issues, the local issues, politics, economics, philosophy, social issues. I think we're all grateful and thankful that you took the time to come and join us. Wish we could have filled this room. This room is wonderful and it's full, but maybe on the next occasion.
Thank you so much again for the invitation. It really is a privilege to me. This is not just a phrase. This is not just a platitude. And I really do envy to this. I will not refer them as tutoring them, young people, they're people. I mean, they're your students, but you're lucky to be here and to study here.
We call them
Probably
the future
aware
leaders,
of that, but you should be more aware when the years lapse.
Absolutely. Please join me to thank President Milanović.